Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Wyenberg. This time we are continuing our reading of Aunt Jenny and the Delayed Quest by Jim Burroughs. Aunt Jenny and her company have reached Illamcrown, the capital of Fairy, built into the Tree of Fairy and over the waterfall that continually cascades down from it. They are there to meet Queen Maeve and seek her help. Soon they were joined by a pair of rumblers called Rollabut and Garrel, who sailed with them to the Harbour Royal and proved to be expert at mooring to the piles there. As planned, Cat ferried them to the Royal Pier, where they were allowed to dock and debark. As soon as Aunt Jenny identified herself, an honor guard was assembled to escort them to the palace. A pair of tall fair folk, one male and one female, and a pair of badger-like dwarves of indeterminate sex. All were dressed in the same red and gold livery, which they soon learned was, in keeping with little Jenny's journey to the summer fall, the uniform of Maeve's palace guard. "Wow, Disney's got nothing on this fairy castle," observed Sasha as they crossed the broad plaza from the royal pier to the palace, with its many towers and spires dappled by the sunlight filtering down through massive branches of the world tree high overhead. "Breathtaking," agreed Aunt Jenny. Tendrils of mist wafted up from the summer fall, which plummeted down only a few hundred yards to their right to the summerlands and the roots of the tree. The plaza was paved in an intricate pattern of multi-hued stone and hardwood tiles. Across it walked an ever-changing crowd of fey folk, tall, elegant fair folk, woodland elves, stocky dwarves, and rumblers. Here a naked stone giant, head and shoulders taller than the high elves. There a crowd of scurrying, gabbling brownies or prowling spriggans, dressed in leaves, bark, and mold. Winged pixies flittered like giant humanoid dragonflies, staying as much as possible in the sunlit patches. Larger, elegant butterfly-winged fays fluttered about. A hawk-winged couple soared in elegant patterns, perhaps reflecting the plaza's mosaic. At the palace gate, thrown wide, they were met by a tall, imperious, white-bearded gentle fay, dressed in red and gold velvets and silks, his beard stretching down below his belt, a gnarled, hawk-headed staff in his bony hand. "This way," he commanded, and strode toward the palace at a pace that made the long-legged women pick up their own and the little three break into a scampering run. The four guards spread out in a square formation around them. They weren't gathering a crowd, but a curious buzz of conversation and gossip seemed to follow them among the passers-by. Aunt Jenny couldn't make out much of what they were saying, but it did feature different variants on her name and glosses. Up the palace steps they strode, through the huge red doors thrown wide. Aunt Jenny would have liked to have taken in the details, comparing them with the classic illustrations of Jenny's journeys, but the chamberlain, for that's who he must be, kept up his pace. She was glad for the many months of 5-mile walks. They passed through the broad main hallway of Maeve's palace and turned left through the great doors of the lesser audience chamber. Small clusters of fey folk were clumping about the room, growing silent as she followed the chamberlain, but Aunt Jenny's attention focused on the queen, sprawled in her throne, languidly pondering some important matter concerning the handful of fays standing before her. Maeve spoke to them quietly and waved her hand dismissively. They withdrew through the chamber, now silent but for Jenny and Sasha's footfalls and those of the badger dwarves. The queen sat upright and leaned forward, resting her elbow on one knee. She fixed them with her gaze. Dressed in simple wine-red tunic and hose, a gold circlet holding back her auburn tresses, she gave off an aura of strength, power, age, and, Jenny was surprised to realize, near exhaustion. She gestured offhandedly for them to approach. They did, following the chamberlain, who had never slowed in his approach. "The petitioner known as Aunt Jenny, reputed missing hero, and her party, Your Majesty," he called out as he suddenly stepped aside, leaving them marching straight toward the Queen. The guards halted in a line behind them. Aunt Jenny slowed and stopped a dozen yards before the Queen. Sasha was to her right, 3 to her left. Rudy sat by Sasha's heel, and Big Tom set himself about a yard in front of Jenny. Little Dickens poked her head out of the bag to see what was happening. "Come forward, sister, if that's who you be. Speak for yourself," commanded the Queen in a soft, low voice that was imperious but wearied. Aunt Jenny stepped forward, the rest of her party forming a V behind her. Big Tom took a position by her feet, only slightly to her fore. "If it please your Majesty, I am Jennifer Winston." A shiver ran up her spine as she said her own name. "Called Aunt Jenny, namesake of my great-aunt known as Little Jenny. I come to the Halflands by means of artifacts inherited from her. I make no claim to title or authority for my actions. I am a nurse, a healer by training, a librarian and instructor by profession, retired now to my gardens, my woods, my books, and my girls. I find myself drawn into the needs and conflicts of these lands through no intention of my own, but to aid those who ask it of me. I present myself before you to request your aid in these endeavors." The Queen sighed and smiled. "Well said, as befits a putative sister queen and heir to your great-aunt. You and your delegation may remain." She rose and, addressing the room in a voice now clear and loud, continued, "For all others, this audience is ended. You may depart." The crowd, murmuring, started to clear the room. The chamberlain, their escort, and the guards stationed around the room did not move until the Queen made little dismissive gestures with the backs of her hands in their directions. Soon the doors closed on the small audience chamber. The silence echoed throughout it. The Queen collapsed into her throne. She pushed her velvet-covered footstool out toward Aunt Jenny. "Sit, please." Jenny climbed the stairs and sat on the grand stool, Rudy and Tom by her feet. Sasha and 3 sat on the stairs behind and to either side of her. The Queen exhaled a combination of sigh and chuckle. "So the 12th Queen arrived at last. Will you save us, then?" she said in a tired tone, tinged with both hope and skepticism. "I truly do not know, Your Majesty. Maeve, if you are indeed that Guinevere." "Thank you, Maeve." Aunt Jenny shook her head. "I do not know if I am any Guinevere, the great Jennifer, or anything more than simple Aunt Jenny. I always thought of my great-aunt as the great one, the Jennifer whose name I bore. I only barely believed that she meant it when she recounted little Jenny's journeys as if they had really happened. They were the children's stories of my youth, and she died not long after I reached adulthood." The Queen smiled. "And who are your companions?" "This is Alexandra Levin," again a shiver ran up her spine, "called Sasha, and this is the Scout, 3. "And yon forest cat and the others?" "He's Big Tom, this is Rudy, and," getting the kitten out of her bag, "this is Little Dickens." "You inspire love, respect, and loyalty. A good sign." Jenny returned Little Dickens to her compartment. "And the shade that hovers by your shoulder?" "The shade? A ghost?" Aunt Jenny closed her eyes, breathed deeply once, and tried to picture, to feel, the room and folk around her. For all its strangeness, she felt comfortable, at home, safe. Perhaps there was someone standing just behind her shoulder. "I don't know, Maeve. I'd like to believe that it is my late husband, my Dr. Tom. As the shiver started, she decided not to give his full name. We have visited recently in dream. It would be good if he was looking over my shoulder. I have heard about you from Alba Heath, Ashetta, and Scathach. You and yours have been striving for us all. What would you have of me? Two things, your aid and your advice. The aid is for Vrayan and Vivian. She, or her shade, is disabled and trapped in an underwater cave off the Shattered Isle. He will not leave her, but is being sickened by the vapors of the poison there. She recovered the Sword of Fire, but succumbed herself. They need help. If there is someone that you could send? She shrugged. I can ill spare aught to aid them, but I shall send what help I can. Thank you. And the advice? Vivian was wearing the king's eye to fetch the sword, and the eye was lost along with her. I had planned on coming here in hopes that, knowing the fairy crown, you might be able to recommend a substitute for it to hold the eye. Now we don't even have the eye, and so we must find two substitute pieces, or one grand complete one. It would be a lot easier to find a substitute for the king's eye if we knew how they were supposed to be going to be used. Alba Heath wasn't particularly clear on that point. Can you shed any light on the questions? The mage and the scholar knew more of such matters than I. The crown is a thing of power in and of itself, capable of calling on the power of faerie and channeling it to the wearer. If I had it still, I could draw on the power of the Summerlands, which lie so close by, to stabilize the city here on the fall's brink. As it is, I must do that with my own power. I haven't enough to completely solve the problems caused by her damage, and so I must continuously hold us back from disaster. I see. And do you know what the eye would do mounted in it? It is said to ward off intoxication, illusion, delusion, and confusion. Reinforced by the power of the crown, that would be amplified. Had I to guess, I would say that it might be powerful enough to protect the wearer on a journey deep into chaos, to places where a living being, dependent upon a body that works by natural and supernatural law, could not go unprotected. The mage thought that likely, and Alba Heath followed passages that indicated that it was on the very rim of chaos that your battle with her will culminate. Do you know what she wanted with the crown? Perhaps. Having been exiled from the Halflands and the Nine Realms, she has created her own city, a colony deep into chaos, at a place where the energy of chaos is wild and magic is strong. She has been kidnapping many of the marginalia and holding them in her city to tame the wild magic of the place. Without them, the environs of the Rim would tear her city apart. The crown and eye would be of great value in that, and would allow her to go deeper into chaos. Someone equipped with the crown and eye might be able to free the captive marginalia and devastate her city, depriving her of a base and cost her her war. And without the eye? After we drove her from Illimcrown, she attacked Patala and wrested the ruby eye, said some to be the mate, the counterpart to the king's eye, from the serpent crown. I am no great friend of the serpent folk, nor well versed in their lore, but where the amethyst eye wards off intoxication and delusion, the ruby eye has the power to transfix, to in part impose the wielder's will. Both grant stability in their own way. So, again, power, order, stability, and freeing or embodying the will are common to the two eyes, and the crown would power or amplify them. And the serpent crown, is it powerful in and of itself, or just a setting for the eye? It is an ancient thing of power. It allows control and draws upon the powers of its environs. The serpent folk are closer to the earth than are we fays, and so it channels power differently. So, it might be used in place of the fairy crown to hold the king's eye if it can be recovered? It might, yes. Would the serpent folk give it up? How likely is that? I cannot say. It is greatly damaged by the loss of the eye. If they thought that it would lead to the return of the two, whole again, once more, perhaps. Our two folk are no great friends, but if a human, the 12th queen, were to ask, with the power of the prophecy at her back, perhaps. And what of our eye? If we cannot retrieve it along with Vivian, is there something that might stand in its stead? I know not. If there is, I know naught of it among the Fey folk, and so you may need to seek it among the others, the Jinn, the Serpent folk, the Titans, or the giants of the Winterlands, or perhaps in dream. It looks as if I have my journey cut out for me, finding such things and then discovering how they're to be used against she who was once a dragon. Queen Maeve smiled. I will lend you what aid I may. It seems clear that you are indeed worthy to be the prophesied 12th queen, and are questing on all our behalfs. I only hope that you are not too late, that she has not achieved too much for you, and you're a champion. She nodded towards Sasha, silent upon the steps, to deal with. My champion? Aunt Jenny was suddenly horrified at the thought that she had brought Sasha into mortal combat against Lilith, a figure out of myth and legend, powerful enough to be conquering this whole realm. Surely that is what she is? She bears the third sword, mate to Excalibur and Clarent, and clearly stands ready to use it. But she's just a girl, Aunt Jenny wanted to cry out, but she couldn't bring herself to utter the words. Just a girl? What a betrayal of the young woman who had shown so much courage. Still, she was just a girl, a minor, not even 18 years old. Well, unless she was right, and many weeks, a couple of months, had passed for her in the few days it had taken Jenny to travel to Albahinth and back. Her head swam. Thank you, Your Majesty, came the firm voice of the warrior maid behind Aunt Jenny. She turned to see Sasha, hand lying gently on the hilt of her sword. I will strive to be worthy of your trust in me. Sasha stood up on the steps and, hands still resting on the pommel of the champion's sword, bowed to the queen. No! Jenny could not cry out the traitorous words. No, not one of her precious girls. They're just children. Children. A young woman of 18, the age of millions of soldiers who had always fought the world's wars, who defeated tyranny, preserved liberty. But her girl. Sasha turned to look at her. Are you okay, Aunt Jenny? You look so pale. Please, don't be sick. The tall young woman dropped to her knee and rested a warm, soft, strong hand on Aunt Jenny's forehead, protective concern in her eyes. You're so cold. What's wrong? Nothing, my dear, she said, but her voice broke. I'm fine, she lied. Just in shock at what I've done, overwhelmed by guilt, terrified. Really, it's nothing, just your life flashing before my eyes. Queen indeed, said Maeve softly, looking at the tableau at her feet. She nodded approvingly. Worry not, child. Sometimes the crown weighs heavy even when 'tis unseen. She will be fine. Well, said Sasha, whatever I can do to help bear the burden, you know I'll do it gladly, she assured her beloved mentor. I know, Aunt Jenny managed to utter. I know, she whispered. I think we could all use a bit to eat and drink, observed the Queen. Come dine with me. And with that she stood. Sasha extended her hand and helped Aunt Jenny to her feet. And we will follow Aunt Jenny's journeys, which have been outlined for her now, next time.